God, you read the Quran, and God reassures you, brings that energy up, just like those people who were in the physical war, and God brought them this invisible angels. Keep in mind, they were invisible. They didn't see them. But as our brother mentioned earlier, they believe in the unseen. So God gave them strength. God gave them that energy as we seek Him, and He gives us the energy as well.
I wanted to make a comment regarding the locations that are mentioned in the Quran. It's interesting. So we have Mecca, we have Becca, we have the Kaaba, we have Mina, we have Yathrib, and then in this one we have the example of Badr. And people who are claiming that in essence, like the location of the revelation of the Quran is like different. This is one of the main problems I see with that interpretation is you account for the history and the these other locations mentioned in the Quran. Each of these locations have a rich history of how they came to be. Where their geolocation is, the events that took place at there, and to say that in essence, like put these history in some other geolocation, you run into a lot of issues with that, because the names of these locations didn't come just someone top down labeling it. Like these are the names that have been given there for over 1,000 years. And yeah, in this case, we have the example of Badr, which is just in basically south of modern day Medina and north of Mecca. Those who joined, we read from Surah 3, verse 118, all the way to 129. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions regarding these verses?
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed how it says, it says your Lord will support you with 5,000 angels, well trained. This little statement, well trained, actually says a lot. Well trained, so they have a certain training there. It's not like these angels are popping out ready as warriors. They have a form of training. So they have a certain education here regarding, I guess, military or something, which tells me that different angels there might be different professions, different educations. Like one might be like a couple angels might be experts in the computer when and then they perform their task when the miracle was coming out. Other ones might be like here the military ones trained, and etc.
Alaikum. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the verse 123, and brother Mike and everyone, Hakeem and everyone. I love the allegory that you were thinking about, because I think this is also a motivation thing, because God has granted you victory at Badr despite your weakness. So I think this is the key word, the weakness, because people always relate that weakness is when we are few in numbers. That's why God supports you with so many angels, no matter what. So I think this is more a motivation thing, because you can see this concept also in the verse about Yathrib also, when people are like finding excuses to not to be with the believers. So I think this is a very good motivation thing for submitters to think about. Just because you're less, it doesn't mean that you're less, literally. You have to be confident and trust in God.
Well, I agree, and also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us in the Quran, I don't know exactly what verse it is, but he says the more we appreciate him, the more he gives us. So the more we are appreciative, the more angels he sends. And they're well trained. They see God can see down the street and around the corner. Things that we can't see. We don't know what's coming at us down the line, in any given moment, any given second, any given day. We don't know, but Allah knows, so he got the soldiers well trained. And sometimes when things happen, and we don't, when we're told no or disappointed, and we don't know if it's good or bad, but Allah knows, you know. So yeah, that is great motivation. I agree.
It's also,
On this same topic, yes. No, you please.
No, mine's
You
a
please.
slightly different aspect of the same verses. So please, since yours is on the same topic, please continue.
Oh, it was just simply that in some of the audios, Dr. Khalifa talks about who's in the majority, you or a pile of ants. So you got a whole anthill. There's thousands and thousands of ants down there, but then there's you standing there. Who's in the majority? And he would say that you are in the majority. And the comparison was like a well-developed soul. That a well-developed soul, a human soul, he was saying, can be as big as an angel's, which an angel can hold the whole earth in his hand. So if you're thinking of majority of a well-developed soul versus a bunch of people who have not a developed soul, the strength is actually within the believer.
Yeah, another comment on the verses 3:121. It's also something that a lot of people tend to forget is that we have an example of Prophet Muhammad, who we know he was a messenger of God and he had to be obeyed. And we see this example here. He is giving instructions for battle, right? So he was also their leader. So we have examples, and also in Surah 66, at the beginning, we have Prophet Muhammad who made an error with regards to the religion, and God admonished him and corrected him. It's also in Surah 80, he frowned, God corrected him in the Quran. But yet there's also this element, he's a leader giving instructions, and he had to be.
Did you finish the point? The last bit cut out. One made the reference to the battle of the parties. I think these verses are pretty applicable to what we read. Put them in from 9 through. This is from the Battle of the Parties. This is, "Oh, you believe, remember God's blessings upon you. When soldiers attacked you, send upon them violent and invisible soldiers. Wind and invisible soldiers. God is seer of everything you do. They came from above you and from beneath you. Your eyes were terrified. Your hearts ran out of patience, and you harbored thoughts, unbefitting thoughts about God. That is when the believers were truly tested. They were severely shaken up. The hypocrites and those with doubts in their hearts said, what God and his messenger promised us was no more than an illusion. A group of them said, O people of Yathrib, you cannot attain victory, go back. Others made up excuses to the prophet. Our homes are vulnerable when they were not vulnerable. They just wanted to flee. Had the enemy invaded and asked them to join, they would have joined the enemy without hesitation. They pledged to God in the past that they would not turn around and flee. Making a pledge with God involves a great responsibility. If you flee, you can never flee from death or from being killed. No matter what happens, you only live a short while longer. And put the verses as far as the response from the believers too, just so we have the full picture. Through 20. It says, the messenger of God has set up a good example for those among you who seek God in the last day and constantly think about God. The true believers saw the parties ready to attack. They said, this is what God and his messenger have promised us. God and his messenger are truthful. This dangerous situation only strengthened the faith and augmented their submission. Among the believers are people who fulfill their pledges with God. Some of them died, while others stand ready, never wavering.
Dear family, make a comment on Surah 3, verse 126. I'm just going to make a comment on the word victory. It says victory comes only from God. I don't know if somebody talked about it earlier. Wasn't quite listening to the first half. I think it's pretty fascinating that we have to understand that in anything we do, especially in the cause of God, ultimately victory comes only from God. Any advancement we make or anything we do in his cause, which is really victory, really only really comes from him. and not necessarily from just our effort, and we get the credit for it, but ultimately God is the one who's granting that victory. And the reason I say that, I think it just makes us appreciate the outcome much more, because when we know God is the one who's doing everything, and this kind of reminds me of Surah 8, verse 17, where God said, about God is doing everything. Shah translated really well. It says, it was not you who threw, it was not you who killed them, it was God who killed them. It was not you who threw, it was God who threw. He thus gives the believers a chance to earn a lot of credit. So again, give the believers earn a lot of credit is ultimately God is the one who's doing all those victories, all those things, and us carrying those things in the cause of God. Obviously, God willing, we get the credit for it, but ultimately God is the one allowing all that to happen. And I think establishing that in our mind, in our mindset, we become much more calm about how we succeed, especially in spreading God's message or what we do to please Him. Because sometimes I could imagine myself might become frustrated, like, oh, how come this is not happening the way I want it to be? Well, things don't happen in my time. So having that, I think, gives us ease and peace, I should say, when we do something in that cause.
This stuff is just a mechanism to be put to the test, to see if we trust that God is doing absolutely everything. There's a cool verse in Surah 2, verse 243. Have you noted those who fled their homes, though they were in the thousands, fearing death? God said to them, die, then revive them. God showers His grace upon the people, but most people are unappreciative. If you trust that God is doing absolutely everything, we shouldn't even fear death, because God's the one who controls life and death. I find this fascinating that, here's these people, they're fleeing their homes because they're fearing death, but they fail to realize that God is the one who controls life and death. God has them face their fears by putting them to death and then revives them. And this should give us kind of assurances in the sense where these obstacles that are placed before us, God was fully aware that those obstacles are going to be there. And God has already given us everything we need in order to be successful. The only thing that's left is if we trust in God or not.
Mashallah. In addition to that, sometimes in my own journey and submission, in the beginning or even toward later, whatever, I mean, sometimes we feel, or I feel, we want to be guardian of, I don't know if it's the right word, guardian of submission, meaning we don't want it to get contaminated. We don't want it to, people change this beautiful message we got, Rashad's translation, beautiful. I mean, the whole meaning of everything that just made just perfect sense. And rightfully so. I'm not saying we shouldn't be, and we should, God willing, do our best. But ultimately, the way I look at many years ago compared to now, with advancement of computers, internet, and Discord, Facebook, Snapchat. I mean, all these medium, God has really put in place to get the message out. I mean, there's no way in my wildest dream I could have imagined how God's message is being spread. Now, how people perceiving it or accepting it, hey, that's not my business. But what I'm saying, I guess for me, you just realize that I'm nobody, and God has all these planned out. And as read 933, talking about victories, that eventually God's religion will dominate the whole world. I mean, whether I want it or not. And this also reminds me of, I think Surah Baqarah talks about Mecca. I think he was talking earlier, which is really beautiful, that God says in this plantless valley where people will come there in large volume to perform the Hajj. If somebody asked them, like many years ago, that this place is gonna be providing pilgrimage for like over 10 million people, somebody would be laughing. Just imagine you're in some desert, very hot, very arid, and you're going to be performing Hajj, and yet you go there, mashallah, is amazing. So all those things that seems improbable to us, for God is obviously easy, and God has already planned all this out, and truly the victory, mashallah, comes from God. I mean, it's amazing how Message has taken its own life in its own way with all these different types of people. Obviously, we see on these chats with different levels of belief and all these discussion. And you know what? Bottom line, I just have to submit, and this is God's plan. This is how it's supposed to be. You're going to have obviously rejectors. You're going to have Quranists. You're going to have the people who's going to reject it. But I think ultimately, I think the message is out. I think a lot of people now know about a lot of people, I should say, that I've come across, they know about the math miracle, and people, the message is out, and it's eventually up to them to make the decision to believe or not.
Math miracle is becoming more bigger and bigger and bigger. It's almost like people are getting really disturbed now about the about the math miracle. So, but like you said, it's God's plan.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of things on the internet with different groups, especially a lot of the traditionalist Muslims. They've been trying to give their own explanation of the number 19. It's crazy.
Well, that's the thing. We even have some of Sunni scholars. I know there's one in Toronto who's actually acknowledging that the 19 is a math structure in the Quran. Of course, in his video, he said it was discovered in 1976 because, well, they don't want anybody to know about 1974, which is hugely prophetic. But anyhow, more.
Any other comments about the verses we read? So we read from 3:118 through 129.
Yeah, there's a statement here, like even these people that warred against the prophet and the believers, God says, "It is not up to you. He may redeem them, or he may punish them for their transgressions." It's not a one directional. It's not like God will punish them for their transgressions. No, He says He may redeem them. So there's always the door open for redemption, and it says He may redeem them. So God is planning. I think God is planning some of them to be redeemed, which I think it did happen because it does say another verse said that you were at the brink of a fire, enemies of one another, right? So it did happen. So for now, this is also the same thing. There are also other verses in Surah 9 about hypocrites where God says He may redeem them or He may punish them. So even in our age as well, there's always the door open for their redemption. Actually, it's actually very related to what you guys just said just a minute ago. Like we have people that talk about the miracle now, but they're still traditionalists or whatever. They don't still accept. And basically, God is saying He may redeem them or He may punish them. For example.
From this point of view, this touches on the concept that God is doing everything, which is such a radical concept that I, in my own life, can challenge myself. Do I really believe that at any time? It's such a radical concept that God is doing everything. So when you see that it's up to God whether He punishes them. It makes me think of statements that we often say, stuff like, well, we can't let them get away with it, or we need to stop them, or things like this. And when you put that beside the concept that God is doing everything and that it's up to God whether He punishes them or not, it really challenges our what we actually have the right to do in terms of opposition and in terms of our behavior of trying to control an environment. We can't let them get away with it is the thing. Well, it's up to God. And then what is our action? It's God's going to punish them. Anyway, I know this is kind of philosophical, but I kind of think it touches on some of the ways we could examine our own behavior again.
That was an important point. So Jeff brought up. Truly, God is the one who's controlling everything, and not only that, but also I put a verse on VC1. So it talks about how to deal with hypocrites, and it's very profound. I mean, to really digest it and do this is hard because I think by nature we're more judgmental. But we talk about it. So why should you divide yourselves into two groups regarding hypocrites among you? God is the one. Again, God is the one who condemns them because of their own behavior. Do you want to guide those who are sent astray by God? Whoever God sends astray, you can never find a way to guide them. So by nature, we get encompassed if we see hypocritical behavior, we want to banish them, we want to get rid of them somehow. But ultimately, God is the one who really will eventually sift them away. We don't have to do that. That's why I believe we just have to do our righteous work, God willing, and do that. And eventually hypocrites just drop out. There are many verses, I think 22, 52, the hypocrites just drop out eventually. So you don't have to really do anything. And God is the one. And because the hypocrites, another thing they do, you have to be careful, is they could divide the believers, especially when you try to take them away. And some people might say, why are you doing that? He was such a good person. And whatever. And that's why this verse, I think, talks about how to deal with it. So why should you divide yourself into two groups regarding hypocrites, right? Because you may see certain hypocritical behavior, but by trying to divide yourself, what happens? You might be inadvertently dividing the community. But I think God is the one who says, I'm the one who will deal with them. So anyway, I just found that interesting.
I think it hits the nail on the head, frankly, about, again, the division in the submitter community. It's not recognizing the importance of that very verse you just said, that we are not to divide ourselves because we have perceived somebody as a hypocrite. That means there is going to be, it's the internal ranks of our community. We're not going to feel like it's purified of everything that we think is outside the boundaries of our faith. It means that you're going to have people who literally are not believers, but they just say they are, and they're going to say all kinds of things. What can you do?
Thank you very much, Brother Jeff. Now we're in the second half of the Quran study, and we're opening it up to questions or comments regarding any issue in the Quran, and continue talking about this hypocrite topic.
I want to talk about, let me finish the hypocrite comment, if you don't mind. I just posted another verse too. It's kind of important, I think. I learned the hard way about this because I think I made my mistakes on dealing with this issue, which is I find it very important. But again, I guess life is a rehearsal for us to learn from our own mistakes. Look at, for example, 22:53, which I kind of alluded earlier. I dropped it. It says, hypocrites drop out. See, with that sets of devil's scheme as a test for those who harbor doubts in their hearts, those whose heart are hardened, the wicked must remain with opposition. See, the hypocrites drop out. You don't need to necessarily do anything to repel them. I mean, eventually, hypocrites drop out, and that's God's system. And I think it's really hard for us because we want answer right away. Look, you got to get out. You're a hypocrite. Get out of here. But eventually, if somebody's truly a hypocrite, they won't last. They'll just drop out. And I've seen it throughout the years. Eventually, so I think it's a hard thing to implement. I think to do, but I think we just have to leave it to God, inshallah. Thank you.
I think the next verse from 488 to 489, it also sheds light on this. It says, they wish that you disbelieve as they have disbelieved, then you become equal. It says, do not consider them friends unless they mobilize along with you in the cause of God. If they turn against you, you shall fight them, and you may kill them when you encounter them in war. You shall not accept them as friends or allies. God is putting, again, this contingency here. If they're, acting accordingly in the cause of God, that, we can befriend them. If they actively fight us, in the sense of physical altercation, God is telling us, in essence, to ban against them, to fight them. So, just merely labeling someone a hypocrite doesn't give us the right to, in essence, be mean and nasty and harsh and stuff with them. They have to also, in essence, have that the other elements at play too. Regarding the other points that was made about redemption, interesting. If you read Surah 26, verse 11, God is saying regarding Pharaoh's people that when Moses and Aaron went to them, that they had the opportunity to reform. Now you think they're enslaving the children of Israel, they're doing all these heinous crimes. Despite that, God is saying that they had the opportunity to reform, and we saw that in Surah 40 that one of the believers among Pharaoh's people did take heed to the message, and even Pharaoh himself, when Moses and Aaron went to him, he had the possibility of repenting, reforming. To speak to him nicely, he may take heed or become reverent. He had the capacity to correct his ways. He actively made the decision not to. And this is something that, if we take someone as bad as Pharaoh, and this is up until that point, Moses and Aaron went to present the miracles to him. Even despite all the atrocities he committed, God is saying he has the potential to repent. But at the end of the day, the people make the decisions which causes their end outcome. We need to give people, in essence, the benefit of the doubt that they could potentially come around.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. I like also the way that I see it is, I'm reminded of this quote that says, "A house divided cannot stand." And so whenever I read a verse like that, especially dealing with hypocrisy, it says, "Do not divide yourselves." And for some strange reason, it's like a self-examination. I have to self-check myself. Is there any hypocrisy within myself? And whenever I'm able to overcome that which is within me, then it makes it a whole lot more easier to deal with that which is external, which is outside of me. And so I that's the way I just look at it.
I had a comment on this regarding the harsh and stern, these people, the disbelievers that are attacking us or wishing us harm. We had an interaction recently where, Brother Dude was saying basically someone came in here and made it very absolutely crystal clear that their only function is to disprove our religion, attack us, and wish us destruction. So quickly, a few people noticed that the tone changed when this individual, approached, and I think that for rightly so. And you could load the verse about how, the believers are kind and compassionate amongst themselves and harsh and stern with the disbelievers, because we have an outsider coming to wish us harm, undermine our religion, undermine our entire faith. They're not coming with in good intentions. They're not indicating in any way that they're an investigator or they're sincere or open. Their heart, their chest is open, their heart is open to the message of submission. So when they come in that form, then we appropriately have to react in a particular way, because otherwise we would just be foolish and not addressing the issue at hand. So that's how I see that.
Also, we have to appreciate at least the guy came and said that's nice. I'm not sure if I put that guy, I don't know, in the standard form of hypocrite. He just said what he's going to do. He wasn't being conniving and eventually do that in disguise under the guise of submission or something. He just said, "No, I'm here to refute you guys." So that was nice. That was an easy decision. Well, the platform is not for that. So I just want to bring that. That was actually being very straightforward in that regard.
I think it's critical. Go ahead, Jeff.
We have to be careful. There is a thing in human weakness called persecution complex. I mean, it's a real thing, and we have to examine ourselves. At what point is the threat or the opposition? There's a little bit of suspicion involved in a persecution complex. That you really think it's something that it's not. That's what I worry about. It's like, because see, that's the sin. If somebody gets away with doing something, what's the sin? Did you just cause a sin by letting somebody get away with something? Or is the sin being having a sense of like they've persecuted and I have to do something about it. That's personally, in my opinion, that's where you're going to cause a sin. Letting somebody get away with something, I don't feel I've sinned. But if I get after them and it's not justified, I mean, that's where the question is it justified? So the safer route, I don't know, is to be patient and open.
Oh, if we're not debating in the best possible manner, then, so I would agree with you, because persecution is definitely not debating. That's basically, I'm right, shut up, get out, right? There's no kind enlightenment. So I would agree with you.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I'm not saying that we should have, be intolerant towards people. Everyone is allowed to come and express their views in a peaceful, civil manner, share ideas, express themselves. That's fine. But when you say your sole intention is just to harm the believers, it's really just to destroy a religion in your mind, and you have no intentions beyond that, then I think at that point you are just an open, blatant disbeliever, and
I would agree with you. I agree with you in a situation like that, Naveed. I didn't mean in a general conversation it should be the same. But when someone's coming out saying, I am here to fight you, well, then you know what they are, right?
Exactly. And that's the verse I read, a verse I posted in VC1-chat. Says, I seek refuge God for saying, rejecting the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Muhammad, the messenger of God, and those with him are harsh and stern against the disbelievers, but kind and compassionate amongst themselves. So that's how I understand that. I mean, I'm giving a lot of leeway here, right? Because we have the teaching from the messenger of the covenant. I want to also load that here. It's from a pamphlet from the last conference where he's referring to chapter 60, verse 8 and 9, where we learn that is the key element that we have to, the umbrella rule. So let me read that for you guys. Second to last paragraph, it says, God and his angels treat every human being as a potential believer until the time of death. Let us do the same. Let us love every human being as a potential believer who may become better than you and me in due time. This is by no means the blind love. Our guide here is the Quran, 68 and 9. So there's nothing wrong with, discussing. A lot of people have some wacky ideas, and we can investigate, we can analyze and discuss it. But when they openly say, no, I'm set, I'm a disbeliever, and my only function here is to disprove your religion, then even then, I have no problem debating that individual. The tone is going to be different. It's going to be changed accordingly, in my view.
The great example is Moses going to Pharaoh, and how does God tell him to speak with him? And this is Pharaoh. He's already been killing the children of Israel, the child, the boys. He's already doing that. This is the apex of enemy of God, and yet his instruction was to speak to him nicely. Maybe he'll change. That's the warning. It's like, oh wow, I've got to be careful of how far I go. Not only that, haven't you noticed with people, they're bluster. A lot of people are just bluster. They're coming from one position, but you may change somebody just if you're nice to them, where they're not expecting you to be nice. They're here for a battle, and it's like, wait, that guy was really nice to me. And not only that, he made a good point. Maybe they'll think about it 2 years later. Man, that guy that's right. There's that point that he said, it's been bugging me. That kind of thing. This is what I think, that to rise above the spirit of a submitter, somebody who's even though they got a growl on their face, you're thinking, oh, they just got a stomach ache. You make excuses for them, even when it doesn't make sense to make excuses for them. That kind of thing. Because I believe, personally, I mean, this is maybe where I'm off on my own. I just think we're safe here. We're fine. Nobody's going to hurt you here. Nobody's going to kill you. Nothing's going to happen. You can say what you want. We can have these arguments. It can go wherever it goes. And I love this server because of that. And I've been in other places where just by bringing up psychology, I'm suddenly an evil person by bringing up psychological studies. So anyway, this site is certainly not on the lowest end of that spectrum.
There's a quote I put on from Maya Angelou that I really like. This is when people show you who they are, believe them. You want to get to a point where someone, in essence, either confesses or is upfront with what their intentions are, who they are, what they believe. So it's not us labeling anyone. This is what they're proclaiming themselves. And I think the one thing I would say that's like a caveat is, yeah, we want to have people abilities to share their viewpoints, this and that. It's critical not to create a toxic environment. If we go to that extreme, we say, look, anything goes, and we just allow, in essence, toxic people really impact the culture of the server, it's at a detriment to all the other people on the server. And that's something to be conscientious of, because once you allow toxicity inside a culture, what it actually does is it repels people who aren't toxic. It attracts people who are. It's like it's really hard to maintain that balance. God willing, God helps us in that endeavor. Having a place where we can discuss ideas, as long as people are debating and arguing in good faith, I find that it's like productive. But once someone, again, they're upfront, their sole intent is to just mock and ridicule and to lead people astray. At a certain point, you realize that their mere kind of like presence and comments are just creating a toxic environment. And I'm not saying that we're always going to get it right, but it's one of those things that we can't be that other extreme in the sense of just saying, okay, all kinds of behavior is going to be tolerated because we don't want to offend anyone.
No, yeah, that seems completely obvious within just regular everyday life, what we're talking about. But what is introduced from the Quran is this notion that God is doing everything, that nothing bad happens to you except for what you bring upon yourself. And so it's like half the argument. It's like the chicken and the egg. When somebody is coming and being toxic and doing that, what did we do to incur that? I honestly, nobody does that in secular living. What did I do to bring that about? It's blaming the self first. What are we doing in this site? What kind of posture are we taking that has attracted this kind of offensive position from the beginning? I think that's what element I want to bring to the table in this, is that we are bringing it on ourselves. It isn't, you attract it. And how? What is it that we did wrong? That's what I would like to say. That's the thinking.
I think it's twofold. There's obviously that reflective element, but the other piece is just the fact of we're tested by each other. And sometimes in the sense that could be in the sense someone does something nice, how do we respond? And then sometimes someone does something that's it's intentionally rude, it's abrasive, it's a mockery, to see how we respond. And the thing is, the two responses shouldn't be the same. If we respond to the person who's being, belligerent and hostile in the same manner as we respond to someone who's being kind and compassionate, it shows that there's, we're not, in my opinion, applying the verse of the Quran correctly. And it's that aspect, again, we don't want to overdo it, and someone just makes a comment and we interpret it in the worst way. When someone is upfront with their intentions and they're telling you, like, look, I consider you an idol worshiper, disbeliever, and all I'm going to do is basically sit on the server and just try to argue and debate and stuff, and not always in the best possible manner. At that point, we're not, labeling. The person's telling us up front who they are, what their intentions are. And in those conditions, I think these are the verses that God is saying, in essence, don't extend friendship to such people. It's not to say they can't come around, but when someone is being upfront with you that, hey, this is who they are, I think it would be naive of us not to to listen to them.
Yeah.
Well, your quote said it all, Peter. With Maya Angelou, that's a great quote. When people show you the art, believe them. Someone says, I don't believe in the mass miracle. I don't believe in this religion. I'm here to fight you. It's like, okay, well, adios.
But,
We have a lot of
but you don't need to fight back. The point is that, see, I don't know. I'm just taking this position, and there's this Islamic understanding that likes to make a difference between, well, we're not passive like the Christians. We don't turn the other cheek. This notion. And the only time that we're not to turn the other cheek is when we're defending God's religion. When we're talking about religion, we're talking about the truth. Other than that, if it's about you personally, if you feel are personally attacked, you're supposed to love your enemy. That is, Dr. Khalifa makes that clear. The Quran is telling us to rise above. You do love your enemy. And in most of these circumstances, this stuff comes to kind of a personal, he kind of jabbed me personally. And sometimes they're talking about belief, and I understand the hardship, the harshness with somebody who says they disbelieve. And what is harshness? Does that mean change your tone, or does that mean to state the truth? The truth can be harsh. What's the most cutting thing against falsehood? Truth. That's harsh. In the face of falsehood, truth. And it doesn't necessarily mean that our behavior, we lower our standard. But the thing I want to point to is if anybody's seen To Kill a Mockingbird, it's a classic scene. Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. At the end, he's guilty of supporting a black man it's in the South, deep South. He's a lawyer. He supports a black man in the South, defends him in a murder, rape. I can't remember what it was, but this was a bad position to be in. You're actually defending the black guy. He was the lawyer in the case. And after the ruling where the black man is acquitted, the community comes to him, and there's this one old farmer guy it comes right up to this lawyer, and he spits at him in his face. And it's the apex of this movie. And this guy has every right. You expect him to punch him, to go out, but he doesn't. He rises above. He just takes it, and the whole situation is diffused. These kinds of passive resistance are real. They are a real thing. Passive resistance, not getting in the mud. It's a valuable thing that I think that we shouldn't ignore history and what we've learned from this bit of wisdom, and just to cause a distinction between Islam and Christianity.
I would like to mention that rather than focusing
I think I agree in spirit in what you're saying. I just want to kind of
Hey, dude, someone was talking. Sorry, I don't know if you have them muted. I don't know who was that just speaking now.
It was me, Zishan.
Oh, good. Sorry.
Does anyone have a comment?
Do you hear him? I think you have him muted.
I don't have anyone muted.
Zishan?
You can hear me fine, right?
I hear you fine.
I have a comment. I have a comment.
I don't think, dude. Guys, Zishan is talking.
Oh, sorry.
Do you guys not hear him? I just want to make sure there's not audio problems.
I don't hear him. Does anyone else hear him?
I hear him fine. Can everyone go on and check if he's muted or on your end or anything individually?
I'm muted on my end.
I heard him.
ZR.
Yeah,
I hear him.
Okay, Zishan, do you want to speak?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, rather than focusing on what others will do, we should rather look at why God put them in our path. What is it that he wants us to see in putting that person who's, regardless of what their stance is, And I think that should be really the takeaway here is regardless if someone's pretending to be friendly or someone who's just straight up being aggressive with us, is to try to think, what is it that we're trying to learn here from God?
May I add to that? If that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think what's always helped me when I'm debating with people who are trying to be quite belligerent is that verse that talks about it's not you. It's not. We know you may be sad by what they say, but it's not you they reject. It's God and His revelations the wicked avoid. So if we keep that in our mind when people are opposing, like the math miracle or what the verses are saying, it's not really us that they're attacking. And the fact that God would even say, and I believe that verse is addressing the prophet at the time, we know you may be saddened, right? So He knows we may be saddened. But if we recognize that it's not us being rejected, then for me at least, it's always helped me to kind of calm myself and not take it personal, because it's not personal. They just don't like what they're hearing. So anyhow, that's
I have a point to make about why we are here to begin with. As we know in the great view and afterward in paradise, we were duped by Satan. And the way he got to us was from stopping us from trusting in God. When we don't trust in God, again, the whole test is over, because we're making ourselves in a way that we don't agree that God is running everything. We made that huge mistake before, so we are down here. Among the people who were rebellious, there were only two kinds of human beings. Ones who believed totally in the fact that Satan can be a god beside God. And then there were other sections that were thinking and believing that we just follow the crowd. They're just blind followers. They don't know really what's happening. That's why God gave us Surah 230. For those who followed blindly and didn't really were wicked people, but they were duped by not trusting in God. So when we come back to earth, it's still the same. There are some people who are evildoers. And because of that, God calls them wicked. Wicked will not grab and benefit from this revelations that we have received. It's already marked. I mean, God says, before I made you, when you come here, you each have a label on your forehead that says a believer or a disbeliever. So in the best scenario, if we want to make it, I hope none of us, I mean, people who are wicked, they will not make it back. But people who were blindly following is the best scenario for us to say, okay, now we have taken a better stand, and we are gonna, we were duped, but we were not wicked. We were just blind and followed the people without knowing what we are doing. So on earth, we have to accept the best scenario for us that we were blindly following. Now, how did Satan got to us? Because he got us to blindly follow and doubt God's absolute authority. Absolute authority. And this is what we need to get back to paradise. This is why God doesn't say to control your ego, but rather it says, kill your ego. When a meaning of ego is that to understand that God is running everything, everything. Anybody who comes, anybody who goes, what position you're set, what you're going to do. And interesting enough, it's all between you and God. All between you and God. I'm going to give you a short story that really says a lot. There was this hiker in the wintertime or skier It was in the night. He fell and he just was coming way down the mountain, and he grabbed a huge branch to hold on to. He really never worshiped God or anything. But that moment he said, "Oh God, forgive me. I need your help. I didn't know about your majesty. I didn't know about you, but now I am dying and I want you to help me. Please, please." And he gets this message: all you got to do is trust in God. And he says, "I do trust in God. I do." So he gets this notion that, please just let go of the branch and you'll be fine. You'll make it. But it is dark and he doesn't see anything. So he holds on to this branch. And no matter what the God says, let go, he just couldn't trust God. In the morning when sun came up, the papers wrote, a very bizarre thing has happened. There is this hiker who is frozen to death only 7 feet from the ground. And basically, if had he left the branch alone, he would have made it. He was only 7 feet. But what he was going was just a lip service. A good lesson for all of us to remember and praise God, and always remember God is running everything.
God bless you, Peace GPS. I really enjoyed your discussion. That was wonderful. Does someone else have any questions or comments regarding the verses that we read or the rest of the Quran? This is the open discussion portion of the Quran study. And also, I wanted to bring everyone's attention to the weekly discussion. If you could please sign up for next week's Quran study. I'm loading it in VC1-chat. If you just tap Peace GPS, if I could just mute you. Sorry, I think you're unmuted. If that's okay. Okay. I'm just loading the in VC1-chat. If you just tap interested on the event, that way we have an idea for the next week's session. God willing, thank you. So does anyone have any questions or comments to share at this point or ask? You could either come up and speak, or you can type in VC1 chat your question or comment.
I was gonna just make a comment towards what Jeff was talking about earlier. I agree with the sentiment of what was said, that in essence, look, we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We have to be, kind and compassionate. We can't go to the other extreme either, in the sense where we start tolerating all kinds of bad behavior. And there are times where, in essence, you have to be, kind of rise up to the occasion to be harsh and stern. It's one of these things. It's to say that, yeah, we use it sparingly, but to take that kind of tool out of the arsenal, I think is like kind of the other extreme that Satan can kind of push us into. In Surah 4, let me see if I can find it really quick. 107 through 109, and I'll be the first to say that these verses do get abused a lot. But nevertheless, it's like there is a time and place for this. It says, "Do not argue on behalf of those who have wronged their own souls. God does not love any betrayer guilty. Hide from the people, do not care to hide from God, though he is with them as they harbor ideas he dislikes. God is fully aware of everything they do. Here you are arguing on their behalf in this world. Who's going to argue with God on their behalf on the day of resurrection? Who's going to be their advocate?" And there's a balancing act in the sense where how we behave with people, what slack we cut them. Where in essence, imagine, like, say for instance, you have a kid who's always misbehaving. At some point, if you're always just going to be, kind and loving and this and that, and you're not going to be harsh and stern with them, it's actually to the child's detriment. And I kind of see it in the same way when we engage with people. If we're always going to kind of just put on the kitty gloves and be, be overtly like passe if they're behaving in a bad mechanism, it's actually to their own detriment as well. But again, it's not something that we use regularly. But there are times and places where, since being firm and more direct with someone is actually to their benefit, and it's what I see like advocated as well.
You know, so there's the philosophy. I know it's okay. Where is that boundary? When do you use these things? Is it just in the cause of God that you use these things? Here's the thing. When do we bring about these problems? Perhaps that child who's misbehaving, it's your fault. Maybe that. I think that is the case so many times that literally it's reflecting some of our earlier evil. It's reflecting something we did. I think this is the best posture to take rather than allow yourself to control this notion of control and I don't know, control, punish, I don't know. There's something about that. That's like I'm going to decide where that line is, and I'm going to control right here. And this is where I get to unleash my fury. This is where, and I'm exaggerating. I'm not talking. I'm just saying that. Wait a second. Some of that feels like relief. It to me. It feels like me relieving myself. Me stopping it right here. This is as far as I can go. That feels to me like I've just relieved myself on somebody else by allowing myself to be controlling of a situation. After the fact, I always feel guilty when I do those kinds of things. I always feel guilty after that. I don't feel like I'm justified. So it's this dynamic. It's literally it's God doing everything. Did we bring this upon ourselves? Are we reflecting on how we behave? Are we looking far enough back behind? Oh wait, what did that maybe, this is a whole dynamic that I'm talking about.
And I think I was just going to add on that actually from earlier. I think I agree in terms of personal issues. We shouldn't be having personal issues, and that's exactly appropriate responses to address the personal issues. But when it comes to religious disputes, I think that's a different realm. And so, it's just, we're just not responsible for others, I guess, in that way. So, but in terms of personal issues, we shouldn't have personal issues. We should be forgiving. We should be kind. We should be very soft in that regard and really consider, being wrong and everything. But when there's an outsider attacking as disbeliever, identifying us as idol worshippers, labeling and then openly being hostile, I think that's a whole other kind of arena that we get into. That's kind of how I see it currently.
If I could add that, so in the aspect is more often than not we're gonna err on the side of being too aggressive, and we need to reverse that, right? Err on the side of being too kind and compassionate. That said, though, there are conditions where, in essence, it's very apparent, and I've just seen this happen time and time again, where the believers are meant to act. Their passe attitude, they use that as like a justification for their lack of action. Good examples in Surah 49, verse 9, where it says, if two groups of believers fought with each other. So it's acknowledging, look, believers fight, right? It says, you shall reconcile them. But here it says, if one group aggresses the other group, you shall fight the aggressing group until they submit to God's command. Once they submit, you shall reconcile the two groups equitably. You shall maintain justice. God loves those who are just. I've seen this a lot of times where you have two believers, they're having a spat, and the neutral parties are like, well, I don't want to get involved, as if that's like the better, the more righteous outcome. And this thing, continues to blow up. More people get pulled into it. Let's say you do reconcile. and one group in essence continues to aggress. I see this as a commandment on the neutral party, again, to intervene to make sure that people are submitting. And if we're going to say that, no, that, I'm not going to, I'm going to be hands off, I see us just breaking, another commandment. That said, again, people abuse the harsh and stern way more than it's properly utilized. But I'm just saying that there is a time and place for that.
Well, so I would just say, all right, let's just say it's a little committee of angels. Here they are. They're sitting in a boardroom. These are angels. And at what point did they say? And what do they say? What would these angels say? This is the thought experiment I would use. When you say that the angel is he has a right to come back, and what's he going to say, and how is he going to say it? That's the thing. So that when I use that, I'm really it makes me really cautious. And see, my position is that I am trying to warn ourselves about being the aggressor when it's not appropriate. That I feel like I feel like I'm not being passive. I'm not advocating passive. I'm literally being aggressive against those who don't see that they might be being aggressive. If you understand what I'm saying. I'm saying, hey, brothers and sisters, let's not aggress against each other because we feel we have the right to, or we should, unless we have to really look at this and expose this. Because why? What's the fundamental problem that I have a problem with is the fighting in the communities, and so that's what I'm saying. So my position is to fight those who feel like they have the right to fight back, that kind of thing, because I'm thinking that sometimes that's where the line is crossed.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right. Does someone else want to make a comment?
How often do you guys come across aggressors?
On a daily basis. I don't know who asked that question.
Pretty often on Discord. I think it just, it attracts certain people who just want to debate and argue and, curse.
Sometimes I just see this as juvenile delinquency. A lot of these guys they're just kids. These are kids on here, and they're just being juvenile delinquent, trying to push, just be, I don't know, idiots. They're just out there being idiots. It's like a pack of kids running around hitting mailboxes with a baseball bat. They're just being idiots. And it's almost to me like dogs barking. And to even engage them is, it's not even appropriate.
But they somehow found the group. I mean, any path that leads to God can be a good one. You never know, right?
No, I'm not talking about immature children. I'm not talking about people that just come in and make a couple of dumb comments and leave. I'm talking about someone that's determined, systematically set on dismantling our entire doctrine and ideology. I'm not talking about immature behavior and childish. Someone comes in streams or sends some stupid images and stuff like that. People that are genuinely vested in the destruction or attacking of our religion. Anyway, we can move on from this topic. Does anyone have any other questions they want to discuss or bring up? Here, a verse was put by Brother Erdem. A couple of verses. Dude put a verse I think is very important. If two groups of believers fought with each other, you shall reconcile them. If one group aggresses against the other, you shall fight the aggressing group until they submit to God's command. Once they submit, you shall reconcile the two groups equitably. You shall maintain justice. God loves those who are just. So we notice here that reconciliation and resolving differences between the believers is a commandment from God. It says, you shall do this. And I believe it is a sin to not engage in this. And it actually hurts our soul by avoiding God's commandments. Chapter 8, verse 50 says, if you could only see those who disbelieved when the angels put them to death, you will beat them on their faces and their rear ends. Taste the retribution of hell. Okay, any questions or comments?
I'll make one comment, brother. Great discussion, mashallah. From the verses that we read, especially the category of hypocrisy, I truly pray to God that, inshallah, I will never become a hypocrite. That's the real critical stage where submitters can fall into. Disbelievers are very clear where they stand, but how does one become a hypocrite? Well, first they were submitters or worshippers of God, and then they got accustomed to hypocrisy. So I think that's one channel for me to be, God willing, consciously aware, as our brother mentioned earlier. And I pray to God for me and all my submitting family members to be conscious of it and ask God not to ever become a hypocrite, because we can sometimes accidentally, fall into hypocrisy or do some things that are hypocritical. That doesn't make me or us a hypocrite, but to practice in it and to just become more accustomed to that. That's a very scary condition for a submitter, a worshiper of God alone. God bless.
Wanted to share again the site for putting together a site to present the mathematical miracle, specifically just the initial counts. If you go to this site and you click on any of the so on the left side we have all the different sets of initials in the Quran. If you click on any of the actual surahs, it's going to have a color-coded image of all the counts. We got through a good chunk of it. The last ones are the Aleph surahs that, God willing, I'm going to work on getting those out. But yeah, if you want to just take a quick gander as far as doing the counts for any of the other surahs, find this format helpful, because you can quickly kind of go through the text and see all the letters counted.